Okay. At the time of this recording, I don't know why, but my allergies are just, I'm haymaker right hooks right now. So if my voice cracks or if I sound stuffy, I apologize in advance and I really appreciate your patience. Growing up, Bebe's Kids was one of those movies that stayed on repeat at my grandmother's house. It still holds up to this day, and not because it scratches some nostalgic itch either. It's hyperbolic in the best way possible. It was funny as a kid, and it's even funnier watching it as an adult. The music in the original score is top tier. I'm the jawbreaker, the candy taker, and never skip school, I'm the food baker. And on top of that, it relays an incredibly important message that I feel unfortunately gets glossed over quite a bit when we talk about the movie, and that's essentially why we're here today. That message being that when we encounter ill-behaved children in the real world, unfortunately there's a tendency, especially for young black kids, to cast a very damning narrative and make the misbehavior indicative of their character and personhood instead of considering the circumstances that are probably driving the behavior in the first place. And when I say probably, it's usually very, very likely. Now, I know this is a comedy, and my goal for this video is not to ruin Bebe's Kids for anybody. It's not intended to make you walk away and feel like you can't find this movie funny. It's hilarious. It's supposed to be funny. In fact, I feel like that's what Bebe's Kids does so well. It really takes us through this chaotic ride with these kids. It has incredible comedic moments, and it delivers a great message without succumbing to the weight and heaviness of what that is, all while keeping it balanced at the same time. I mean, it is a classic for a reason. We can also have conversations like this one about our favorite movies without ruining it for ourselves. That's not my goal here. I just want to emphasize that before we go further. So without further ado, let's talk about Bebe's Kids and the message that often gets overlooked. Before we get into the commentary piece, I am going to do a very, very quick overview of the film just for those who haven't seen it. It's going to be spoiler free, but there will be spoilers ahead after that. So if you want to see the movie and you haven't already, at the time of this recording, I believe YouTube has a version that you can watch that is free with ads. So come back, watch it. If you feel moved to have commentary about this movie after you see it, I'll be here waiting. Bebe's Kids is a 1992 animated comedy starring the late great comedian Robin Harris. The premise of the movie is based on a comedy routine by Robin Harris about a woman who was dating who had a child, who later introduces him to her three best friends' mischievous children, and then all of the chaotic adventures that ensue as a result of that encounter. The premise of the comedy routine is pretty much what the movie is, so that is as much as I can give you without spoiling anything if you haven't seen it. So spoilers ahead from this point on. One of the ways I feel the film is so incredibly effective about how it delivers its message is the perspective that it takes to begin with. So we are introduced to Bebe's Kids and we are going along for the ride primarily through Robin's perspective. And yes, you do have some moments in the film where obviously Robin and Jameka are not around and the kids are left to their own devices, but the point being that it models what we typically see in the real world, right? We usually interact with kids who are misbehaving first before we see anything that might be causing the behavior, and then typically there's a lot of judgment that follows that. So it's true to form in that sense. When Robin picks up Jameka and Leon for their date, he's then introduced to Bebe's Kids. He doesn't know this at the time, and I honestly feel like this was not the best move on Jameka's part. Robin is a stranger at this point. I mean, not to take away from the comedic element of why he was introduced to the kids in this way. It definitely adds to the comedy of the movie. But just put yourself in his shoes for a second. I think anybody could agree that if you were going on a first date with somebody, you agree that you're going to go on the date with her and her child to an amusement park. She shows up with 3 more children that she does not tell you about beforehand, all with the expectation that you will assume full responsibility for her, her son, and all her kids. I think regardless of how you look at it from either end of the spectrum, whether this was a girl taking a guy out on a date or vice versa, it was a weird move to say the least. But again, like I said, it adds to the comedy of the movie, and we're going to touch on that point again later on, so just put a pin in that for now. What we learn about Bebe's kids, Leshawn, Khalil, and PeeWee from the beginning is not very much. They appear a little rough around the edges, especially when you juxtapose their characters with Jameka's son, Leon. They seem that they don't have too many opportunities to go to a place like Fun World on a regular basis. And then from what we know about their mother, she seems to be sporadically absent at a moment's notice. Something else that we also learn throughout the movie is that it seems that Bebe, who is an absent character I might add, we never see her. Think of her like a Heather Sinclair in Degrassi, or some other character that's always referenced in a television show that we never get to see. They're kind of more of a plot device, and so there's not really a need to see them, and also her absence makes a point in itself. So outside of Jameka, we can infer, just based on what the film tells us, that Bebe doesn't really have a support system. So Jameka, for whatever reason, is completely unavailable to care for the kids on Bebe's behalf. They're pretty much left to their own devices and to take care of themselves. So we arrive at Fun World, and from there we are taken through the most hilarious, chaotic ride. The kids end up wreaking havoc on the amusement park. They also recruit other kids to take part of what's going on. We get that iconic bathroom scene between Robin and his ex-wife, the argument, which has nothing to do with anything I'm talking about today, but come on, how could I not mention it?
Hair look like the back of a toaster.
Your mama.
My mama?
Yeah, your whole family.
I'm not gonna get too much into the ins and outs of everything that happens in Fun World, but like I said, stuff goes down. So at the end of it, Robin feels embarrassed, he feels angry, he feels frustrated. So he's not in the mindset to really hear reason or really think about anything that could consider the perspective of the children at this point. Robin, being in the state that he's in, really just reduces the entirety of these kids acting out as behavioral issues at its core. Like, they're not getting enough discipline at home, which is typically what a lot of people do or make the assumption of, right? And so from there, he does what also a lot of people do and suggests, well, you know what, they just need a good old-fashioned whooping, and that's just gonna solve all their problems. Jameka is trying to reason with Robin to get him to understand that, one, a whooping is not gonna help these kids. It doesn't really help children in general, but whatever, different video, different time. And two, these kids are up against some really horrific challenges on a daily basis. They don't have a concrete support system. Their dad's not involved in the picture. Bebe, for what we see of her character, also seems to be pretty neglectful and absent herself, even though she is the only present parent. We never get an understanding as to why Bebe isn't around so much. And I also want to make the point that this is not an opportunity for anybody in the comments to go on a tirade about just don't do it. Up to this point, Robin has pretty much doubled down on the lack of discipline narrative, and also somehow the behavior being indicative of the kid's personhood and not a result of the environment that they're in and the circumstances that they're dealing with on a daily basis. And so now he gets to confront those things head on. He gets to see what they're dealing with for himself. The neighborhood is obviously unsafe for 3 children to be left alone at home, but even if it was a safe neighborhood, there's 3 young kids, so they shouldn't be left by themselves anyway. There's no food in the fridge when they get there. Their apartment is run down, and all they're left with is a note from their mother, Bebe, for Jameka to give the kids dinner and that she'll be back soon. We don't know what soon means. Obviously, when the kids go into the house and they're looking for their mom, she's not there. We can assume that they're expecting her to be there. And then Robin, as he's looking around, walking the kids up and even going through the apartment and reading the note and just having revelations about the circumstances that the kids are in, his hard exterior starts to melt and he starts to have that realization. And for the kids, that tough exterior that they built up, obviously as a defense mechanism, is shriveled away. And what we're left with is three kids who are just kids. Like, they're sad, they're lonely, they're hurt, and they want somebody to be there for them. They're not monsters, and they're not inherently marked by this mysterious misbehavior gene that makes them doomed to misbehave for the rest of their life. They're just children who are looking for somebody to be around, who are lonely and scared, like I said before. All that in mind, the movie does end on a happy comedic high note. Robin has this realization that he doesn't want to be another person who abandons these kids in their life. Him and Jameka reconcile. They all end up going to Vegas on a whim for some reason, and then PeeWee unplugs something that takes the lights out of the entire city of Las Vegas. It's the perfect ending for a movie like this, even with all the heaviness. From here, I'd like to rewind a bit and just shed some light on Jameka and Robin's role. I'd also like to hone in on another example that I feel is really relevant to the topic, which is the 1991 film Problem Child, which kind of addresses a similar theme. So you have this kid, Junior, who gets adopted by Mr. and Mrs. Healy. I believe they can't have children, and they decide to adopt a kid who is very mischievous, to put it lightly. When they decide to adopt him, the orphanage doesn't really get much into Junior's history or his past, so of course they're surprised to know that he has so many behavioral challenges. Towards the end of the movie, or I guess more so towards the climax of the film, Mr. Healy and his wife are kind of like, okay, what did we get ourselves into? And Mr. Healy goes and confesses to the pastor, I don't know that I can do this. Maybe I'm just not a good dad. Maybe I should give him back. And what we see from Junior, who had been cutting up this entire movie, is again, you are left with a child who we later learn has been given back to the orphanage, I think over 25 times.
Listen to him. What am I supposed to do with the little creep? He's already been returned 30 times.
Well, this makes 31, Charlie.
Hold it, stop, wait. What are we talking about? 30 times? Flo, did you hear that? He's been returned? My God, this is a human being we're talking about.
You give me that human being crap? That kid's a monster!
We're doing what everybody else has done to this child. I mean, it's easy to give up on a kid.
And just imagine the level of rejection and hurt that you probably, or not probably, would feel if you were a kid, let alone, I mean, we can't even be taking rejection as an adult sometimes in our dating lives, but imagine just being a child, getting taken back to the orphanage all those times. I'm sure the first time was hard enough, let alone any subsequent time after that. So he does the hard thing, and I say hard thing because there is going to be a learning and unlearning process, and he decides, no, I'm going to stick this out. I'm going to be the best dad that I can be for Junior. I'm going to be supportive. I'm going to be there for him. And I wanted to frame that example in also how we see what Robin and Jameka did. Robin is dealt a hand that he did not necessarily agree to, right? And by all accounts, he could have walked away, and he didn't. And I think that's very commendable, in the same way that Bebe's kids are not Jameka's biological children, but she still assumes a level of responsibility for them because they wouldn't really have anybody else if she didn't. And you can tell that she genuinely cares for them too. It's not out of this weird sense of obligation, but she genuinely seems to have an interest and care for the children. The sad reality is that yes, there's going to be kids that are the Leshawns, that are the Khalils and the PeeWees of the world, who unfortunately are not going to have the opportunity to meet a Robin or a Jameka or a Mr. Healy. But my point is that in whatever capacity you can offer, I'm just saying, give these kids some grace, because odds are they're dealing with quite a bit. But anyways, this is just some food for thought. Don't feel like you have to take anything that I'm saying at face value and run with it. I would love to hear your opinion in the comments, so drop them down below. I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope to see you next time.